It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Yo, it's Rico Brogna time. I'm Professor Roberts, joined by Professor Pete Hoffman. We continue to hand out grades to the New York Mets for the 2025 season. If you missed episode 565, you can listen back. We graded every single position player that played for the New York Mets this past season. Today, on this edition of the Rico Brogna, we're going after the starting pitchers. Every single person that started a game for the New York Mets will be talked about and eventually will be graded. Now, a bunch of guys are going to be mentioned, but we aren't going to grade them today because they were considered openers in the 2025 season. The Mets ended up starting 17 different guys this year. 17 different guys made a start, but a few of them, specifically Chris Devenski, opener, Justin Hagenman, used as an opener, Brandon Waddell, used as an opener, Reed Garrett, used as an opener, and then Huascar Brazoban, who actually did it 3 times. They are all going to be discussed on a future Rico Brogna, where we talk about relief pitchers and what I like to call the Syracuse train, the guys that went up and down from Syracuse numerous times. So to the Justin Hagenman family and to the Chris Devenski family, do not worry. We will talk about your son. We will grade your son, just not today, because they're not real starting pitchers when it comes to the 2025 New York Mets. We'll talk about everybody else. One stat I want to throw at you that is not surprising, but certainly fascinating when talking about the Mets starting staff in 2025. Last year, 2024, the Mets got 892 and 2/3 innings from their starting pitching. That was the 5th most in Major League Baseball. 5th most. That means that their starters went pretty deep into games, at least deeper than basically every other team in baseball, with the exception of 4. This season, they got 796 innings from their starters, so about 100 innings less, and they were ranked 27th. And that is certainly not a surprise for anybody that saw this team. The stretch of games in which nobody could go more than 6 outside of David Peterson. It's almost amazing to think that there were 3 teams that actually got fewer innings from their starting pitchers than the New York Mets. So that doesn't surprise you, but the final ERAs may. In 2024, the Mets had the 12th best starting pitching ERA in baseball at 3.91. This past year, it was 17th at 4.13. So obviously not as good, but not the incredibly stark difference that maybe you thought. Now, that's understandable because in April and May, the Mets had a ridiculously good starting staff, pitching to an ERA in the mid-2s. So an ERA of 4.17, 17th in Major League Baseball, doesn't sound horrendous, but if you kind of go from June 13th on, it is horrendous. But the final numbers, because it is a 162-game season, the final numbers are not that far off. But the biggest difference was innings, by far. The staff last year averaged 5.5 innings per start. This year, it was 4.9. That is a huge dip. So knowing that, knowing the context, let's grade some starting pitchers. Let's take a look at the guys that towed the rubber for the New York Mets. And like we did with position players, we'll start from the very bottom. So we'll start with a guy who's no longer with us. And I don't mean that he's dead. I mean that he was traded. He was actually a part of the Tyler Rogers trade. We're talking about Blade Tidwell. Blade Tidwell only made 2 major league starts for the New York Mets. The first one that he made was a really bad one. It was a doubleheader against the St. Louis Cardinals in St. Louis. Ended up pitching 3 2/3 innings, gave up 9 hits and 6 runs. The other start he made was not that bad. If you guys remember it, it was the Friday night game against the Philadelphia Phillies in June as the Mets were beginning their swoon. He ended up going 3 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, but he was actually really sharp in the first few innings of that game. And the Mets actually had a chance to win the game. It was a tight game. They got Zach Wheeler out, and then their bullpen imploded, and they ended up losing the game 10-2. So it was only 2 starts for Blade Tidwell. One was horrendous. The other one was not horrible. But I guess I look at it this way. He didn't crush his value all that much because eventually they were able to trade him to the San Francisco Giants for Tyler Rogers. I'll start off by saying Blade Tidwell is a D. It's probably easy, Hoff, to give him an incomplete, but if we are staying true to at least handing out grades, 2 starts, 1 horrendous, the other one, I guess, good for the low standards that we created, I would say Blade Tidwell, congratulations, you're on the Giants now, and you get a D.
Yeah, I would have given him a higher grade if Tyler Rogers turned into that lights out relief pitcher that we needed.
Yeah.
I think D is a very serviceable, very fair. I mean, there's no offense to Blade Tidwell. I mean, he got called up to pitch 2 games in the bigs and he wasn't ready yet, so it's fine.
Next up is Brandon Sproat. Brandon Sproat was probably in line to make a playoff start for the New York Mets, despite only making 4 major league starts. I thought Brandon Sproat, in the 4 starts that he made, and he ended up pitching to a 4.79 ERA, was actually a lot better than what the final numbers indicate. His first major league start came against the Cincinnati Reds, and he pitched 6 strong innings, allowing only 3 runs. His second major league start was awesome. It was against Texas, and he threw 6 scoreless innings. His next start after that was against the Washington Nationals, where he pitched 4 innings and allowed 4 runs. But the Mets scored a lot of runs that day and won. And then his last major league start against the Miami Marlins was 4 2/3 innings, 5 hits, and 4 runs. That was the Friday night game that they lost. I thought that in those 4 starts, he pitched a lot better than the final numbers indicate. I think he showed us a little bit of the moxie and the stuff that he possesses. And I also think he was placed in an impossible situation. To be called up and make your first 4 major league starts in September in the midst of a pennant race in which your team is collapsing, that is not an ideal spot. And so for that, I thought he did a pretty good job. I'm going to give Brandon Sproat a C+, fighting through the unfortunate circumstances that he had. I'd be curious to see where this leaves him in 2026. My gut is he's on the outside looking in terms of being in the rotation, that, depending on injuries and health and obviously what they do during the offseason, there's always that possibility he'll make it. But I think he probably starts the year in AAA and then finds himself in the rotation by May or June. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle him. But I would give Brandon Sproat a C+ for his efforts in 2025.
Yeah, I give him a C. I mean, it wasn't too impressive. The one thing that does stick out to me was that he didn't give up any home runs. So I feel like that's a good sign. Again, a little bit less than a strikeout per inning. Again, young, gets thrown to the fire. I think he had some moments there that were shaky, but for the most part, you got to take it. It could have been a lot worse, and I think he did serviceable. So C's fine.
Next up is a guy who's actually on the postseason roster of the New York Yankees, Paul Blackburn. Paul Blackburn was going to be in the rotation coming out of spring training. Like, he was going to be a factor on this team, and then he got hurt. And we didn't actually see him until the first week of June. And his first start, which I don't know if anybody's going to remember, was in June in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. And he shockingly threw 5 scoreless innings. I mean, who the hell saw that coming? Unfortunately, after that, it was a disaster. They used him 6 days later to try to close out a game in Colorado. And he did it, but it wasn't easy. I mean, he ended up pitching 4 innings, gave up a bunch of hits, and got a save that old-fashioned way of pitching 4 innings. But then his next appearance, which was not a start, in fairness, was the Tampa Bay debacle, was the game that really started the demise of the New York Mets on that Friday night against the Rays, where Clay Holmes came out early and Blackburn got 1 out before giving up 4 runs, allowing Tampa Bay to come back. So his bullpen performances were dreadful. And then he returned to the rotation. 3 2/3 innings, 4 hits, 3 runs against the Braves, a loss. 4 2/3 innings, 6 runs, 3 runs against the Braves. That's a loss. Then he had a start against the Pirates, and he went 1 inning. He completed only 1 inning, gave up 6 hits and 3 runs. And then finally, he actually had a decent start against the Atlanta Braves before the bullpen kind of let go of the rope in August after he got hurt again and then came back. And after that, they got rid of him. That was the end of him. They DFA'd him. He ended up with the New York Yankees. Paul Blackburn had too much of a significant role in the 2025 New York Mets. Like, he did too many things to involve the badness, especially that game against Tampa, even though that was an appearance out of the bullpen. I'm going to give Paul Blackburn an F. I think that is an F grade. He was supposed to be a part of the pitching depth. He was supposed to be part of the help and the solution, and he really lit this season on kerosene, or lit kerosene on the fire, whatever the phrase is. I give an F to Paul Blackburn.
Yeah, I do remember that first start that he came out and actually looked good, and I was like, I thought that was going to be the death of the season right there, and he actually surprised everybody. It wasn't until the next appearance where he really did a terrible job. I don't know why. Like, when you look back at this season, we all knew Paul Blackburn shouldn't be making starts on this team. I don't know why he was here. I don't know why we ever really thought of him to be a solution or to be helping this team. So that for that expectation, I remember what you did last episode with Luis Torrens, where you gave him an A. I give Paul Blackburn a D-. You know what? He surprised me.
Surprised you
in one start.
I don't think I'm ever going to live down my Luis Torrens A, especially considering he is the only Met to get an A. We'll see if anybody in the starting pitching category receives an A, but right now the only guy who's gotten one is Luis Torrens. Next up is a guy who we're not going to give an A to, but this poor kid is like the student who it's senior year, except this kid is 12. And you're like, why is this 12-year-old in my senior class? And so when he does really bad on a Regents exam, it's tough to be mad at him considering he's 12. And clearly who I'm talking about is Jonah Tong, who was just not ready. He was rushed. I think that's clear as day. He had some good moments. He had some positive signs. I thought his start after the debacle against the Texas Rangers was certainly impressive and showed the moxie that the kid has. But overall, he pitched to a 7 ERA. They asked a lot out of him, and it wasn't good. The start against Chicago, his last start of the season, was also a disaster. And I don't blame him for the Mets' collapse, clearly. But they asked a lot out of him, and he was unable to deliver. Unless I'm just being really kind, I have to give him a terrible grade. So I'm going to give Jonah Tong a C-. It's not a D, only because, again, this was a kid who was clearly not in the right grade. I still have hopes for him. I still think he has a chance to be a big part of the Mets' future. And even next year, I don't think he's going to be in the rotation out of the gate. But much like Brandon Sproat, except with worse results, he was asked to do something that wasn't fair. So I'm going to give Jonah Tong a C-.
C-. Let's see. You look at the kid again. The situation seemed too big every single inning for him, every single outing for him, and he was able to I remember his first start where he just survived, but he survived well enough to get a decent outing. He probably could have got creamed. Even those numbers probably could have been way worse. And I also remember the defense not helping him out at all either, too. So that also helped with his high ERA. But that being said, yeah, I mean, again, over his head, I'll give him a D. I don't think he was very impressive. He had some moments, but not enough. Not enough for me.
I think the next guy we're going to mention, I'm going to say his name. I'm going to give him his grade, and I don't really want to waste any time on him. And that's Frankie Montas. We know he stinks. We know he was terrible. It was a horrific David Stern signing. He needed Tommy John surgery just to add insult to injury. Frankie Montas is the walking definition of an F.
Okay. Yeah. I think there's going to be more discussion when we talk about David Stearns.
Yes. We'll save that for when we grade David Stern. You know what? Yeah. I'm not going to waste any more time with this guy now. When we get to grading David Stearns in a future episode, there'll be much more discussed about Frankie Montas. Next up, Nolan McLean. Nolan McLean made 8 starts. He threw 48 innings. He pitched to a 2.06 ERA. He had a 5-1 record, and he collected nearly a 2 WAR, which is like nuts considering he only made 8 starts. It's only 8 starts. And I guess that would be the only thing that could keep you from giving him the ultimate grade, which is an A+. But I'm sorry. He couldn't have made more than 8 starts. He got called up. He took the ball every 5 days, 6 days, but sometimes 5 days. And for the most part was beyond our wildest dreams. He pitched like an ace. And I think going into 2026 and certainly going into the offseason, the thing we're probably going to most be excited about is getting to watch this kid every 5 days. Fingers crossed he could stay healthy. So I'm going to do the ultimate. I think it's an A+. I don't think it could have been any better than what we saw from him. So Luis Torrens, you got company. Nolan McLean, A+.
Yeah, I can't see it. There was no knocking him whatsoever. He performed at an elite level every single time he pitched. I know there was one game he got blown up a little bit, but whatever. I mean, he was just fantastic. He basically gave the Mets an end to a season. Like, if it wasn't for him, they would have been done for the last 3 weeks of the season. So because of that, I will definitely gladly give Nolan McLean, and I don't know if I can give him an A+. I don't think I can get anybody an A+ in this team, but I'll give him an A.
It's too much for me to give him an A+. Am I going too far? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not, because I understand where you're coming from, but I just grade differently, and I just can't do it because this team didn't really win anything at all. And again, that's not McLean's fault. I mean, if you had McLean up maybe a couple games earlier, maybe you win 2 more games, and you'd be in the playoffs right now. How about that?
Yeah. Next up is Sean Manaea. Sean Manaea missed the first half of the season, made his first appearance on July 13th, which was the last game before the All-Star break, came out of the bullpen. And then after that was mostly a starter until they used him out of the bullpen in the tag team effort with Clay Holmes, and then basically on a throw day against the Cubs the final week of the season. So he mostly started. This is bad. I mean, I like Sean Manaea. I think we all like Sean Manaea, but in a lot of ways, he's up there as the biggest disappointment of the season. We ended up giving that award to Mark Vientos during the awards ceremony, but he never went further than 5 2/3 innings. And even in that start against Cleveland, he wasn't very good. He could not go deep into games. Early on, he would get off to good starts and then just lose it and then struggle. And the excuse was, this is Sean Manaea's spring training. And then eventually he was just bad all the way around. He had that horrific start against the Tigers, but they overcame it by scoring a lot of runs. He had a very weird start against the Phillies where he got off to a terrible start and then settled down after Carlos Mendoza yelled at him. He had the disappointing start against the Nationals in which he got off to a bad start. Then they went to Clay Holmes. They reversed the tag team, and it was too late because the Met offense did nothing. Unfortunately, I had hopes for him in game 162, but we never found out because Carlos Mendoza was so ridiculously quick to take him out. But overall, the Mets were 4-11 in the 15 games he appeared in. He pitched to a 5.64 ERA. It's impossible to call this anything but a disaster. This is a D for Sean Manaea. And honestly, I should give him an F because it was that bad. But I guess there were some decent moments. Like he did get 5 outs in game 162 and didn't screw it up until Mendy took him out. He did pitch very well on the back end of the tag team with Clay Holmes. But this is a D for Sean Manaea. A very disappointing season. D for disappointment and D for grade for Sean Manaea. What say you?
So the one thing I will say here is he did have 75 strikeouts in 60 2/3 innings. Like, he still had some lights out stuff at times. I'm confused at how he gives up 13 home runs but only walks 12 guys. Like, his numbers were all over the place. Yeah, I would give him an F. Sean Manaea was a complete disappointment. He was supposed to be the ace of the – you talk about what he was supposed to be. Yeah. He was supposed to be the ace of the staff. He did not deliver. He didn't come close to it. He was worse than Clay Holmes, and that was the 4th or 5th starter on our team. I give Sean Manaea an F.
All right. A couple of these guys are going to be very difficult to grade because it's such an incomplete picture. Let me start with Tylor Megill. I know that a lot of Met fans don't love Tylor Megill. They didn't have high expectations for him. He had a good spring training, made the team, was in the rotation, there were certainly some questions before spring training began if he was ever going to be in that position. But because of injuries, it was right there for him. And he pitched well. And he really did. Throughout the month of April, Tylor Megill was pitching to a sub-2 ERA. He was one of their – I can't even say he was one of their best pitchers because everyone was pitching well. It was basically collective that anyone who was taking the baseball every 5 days was pitching really well. And then May comes around, and it was very typical. He kind of went back to being the Megill that we remember, 5 innings, 4 runs, 4 innings, 4 runs. And then he got hurt. And so it was a really good April to which he pitched to a 1.74 ERA. And then he was average. He wasn't horrendous necessarily, but it was more average than anything else. And then he got hurt and we didn't see him again. So I think, like, if we stop this in April, I'd say, yeah, he's fantastic. But a part of the value of Tylor Megill was to be a depth guy. And unfortunately, they just didn't get anything out of him. Because after June 14th, which is literally the day after the season started crumbling, we never saw him again. So he was never able to be a part of the solution. So despite pitching well, I'm going to give Tylor Megill a C-, just because it didn't go anywhere. So it isn't even about his ERA or his performance. It's more just that they never had him in the latter part of June, July, and August and September. And I know this sounds crazy to say about him. They needed him. They really could have used Tylor Megill as they were struggling big time to get innings out of their starters. So for that, I'm going to give Tylor Megill a C-.
Yeah, I mean, he still has a higher whip than wanted with a 1.36, but the 89 strikeouts to 33 walks in 68 innings, it was pretty impressive. High 3s, almost a 4, but still, you take it from Tylor Megill. He's not supposed to be your ace. He definitely performed better than expected. I'll give him a C. I'll give him a C for that.
And somebody else who's very similar to Tylor Megill, except we didn't have the preconceived notions about him, is Griffin Canning. Griffin Canning, of course, gets signed during the offseason. We all kind of like shrug our shoulders like, all right, I guess that's starting pitching depth. And much like Tylor Megill, because of the starting pitching issues the Mets had, injury-wise, he makes the team, right? And he's starting. He's starting that first weekend of the year against the Astros. In fact, he started the 3rd game of the season, and he was good that day. 5 2/3 innings, 2 runs. It was like, all right, not bad. And Griffin Canning then went out and continued to be really, really solid as a 5-inning pitcher. I think we learned early on that that's pretty much as far as he could go. And then if you pushed Canning more than that, there would be bad results. But listen to these pitching lines throughout April. 4 innings, 1 run, 5 1/3, 4, 6 innings, 1 run, 5 innings, 1 run, 5 innings, no runs, 5 innings, 1 run, 6 innings, 1 run, 5 1/3, 2 runs. He had a 2.47 ERA in the middle of May. That was after his start against the Yankees. And then he started to struggle. He had a really rocky outing against the Dodgers, had a rocky outing against the White Sox, then threw 6 scoreless against the Dodgers to get his ERA back under 3. And then he put together 3 mediocre starts in a row that brought his ERA up to 4. Then he's facing the Braves in late June, and he's looking good. I mean, he's looking pretty solid. And then obviously the injury occurs. I was in the building that day. It looks like he got shot. Like it was scary. And we get this horrible news about Griffin Canning essentially tearing his Achilles, I think it was, or his ACL. I forget exactly specifically what it was, but he's going to be out for next year as well. It's similar to Megill in that he was really good for the first 2.5 months of the season. But then he wasn't there when they needed him. He got hurt about a week and a half after Megill got hurt, and he wasn't there as the Met rotation was in pain. Obviously not his fault. I know injuries are a part of the game. But 3.77 ERA only makes the 16 starts. I can't give him a good grade. I'm sorry. Like, and if I'm being mean that I'm, taking points away because of injuries, well, guess what? I am. Availability is a pretty big quality. So for that, I'm going to give Griffin Canning a C as well. I can't give him much higher than that, considering after late June, we never saw him again.
Here's the difference, though, right? Like Tylor Megill, we expected to maybe really be part of this this starting lineup and starting rotation and really be an impact, because we saw him last year pitch rather well towards the end of the season. We were seeing a lot of these guys starting to pitch well towards the end of the season. So we expect Tylor Megill to have a lot more say in this rotation. Griffin Canning, we had no expectation. We saw him with a career ERA of 5 or 6 and going, what the hell are we doing signing this guy? Why are we doing this? Now I understand he only pitched 16 games. But for those 16 games, it's the same thing of what we got from Nolan McLean. Did we expect Nolan McLean to be pitching 8 games this year? No, but when he did, he was impactful. Griffin Canning, could he have done more? Of course. We would have loved him to be here all season long. Maybe the team would have been better. Maybe they would have won some more games. You know not to push him more than 5 innings. But I think for what he did, you got to give him a B. You have to. Griffin Canning, he surprised me. And that guy, if he didn't get hurt, he was probably going to be a lock for the most innings pitched as a Met this year.
I don't know. I don't know where this goes. I mean, he was starting to struggle. We probably would have been calling for him to be out of the rotation in mid-July.
Trade him. Send him down to Syracuse.
We got 3 more guys left, and I think they're very difficult to grade. Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga ended up making 22 starts for this team. His ERA is 3.02. And I think if I said to everybody back before the season started, all right, here's the deal. Kodai Senga is going to make 22 starts. He's going to throw 113 innings. Your first reaction would be all right, he missed 9 starts. When did he miss the 9 starts? Hopefully it was just June, July. And then he came back for the stretch run. That's kind of what happened. The problem was his ERA and numbers were so good at the beginning that even his struggles upon return still brought it up to a respectable number at 3.02. The best ERA of any starting pitcher the Mets have this side of Nolan McLean. But obviously, if you watched him, they wouldn't start him the final 3 weeks of the year. That's all you need to know. They were more willing to start Jonah Tong, who wasn't ready, Brandon Sproat, who was a rookie, tag team Sean Manaea and Clay Holmes. They were willing to do anything but start this man. And that brings his grade down immensely. So you could sit here all day and tell me it's a 3.02 ERA, 113 innings. That's not bad. It was so bad at the end that they wouldn't pitch him. So it's a C-. Again, same thing. I mean, I don't know how anyone could give him a decent grade. And it's evidence that the final numbers can sometimes be deceiving. But it was disastrous for him. And look, everybody's body is different. I get that. But that injury should not have derailed his season. It wasn't an elbow injury. It wasn't an arm injury. It was a freaking leg injury. And, you hear Kodai Senga through his translator, well, your body's completely different after injury. I mean, you glance at him the wrong way, and there was going to be, the temperature's too high. And I'm a Kodai Senga guy, but this was the year where I lost my patience. So C- for Kodai Senga.
See, I'll give him a D+ because here's the reason why. The expectations were he's healthy, he's going to pitch every single day, he's going to go deeper into games, all this stuff. And he didn't do that. He fell short. Again, could only go so far in every game. I think there was how many games did he go to 7 innings? I think there was 1.
I think only once all year, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dude, again, we're talking about Sean Manaea. That's why I gave him an F. He's supposed to be the ace. This is supposed to be the secondary ace. This is supposed to be if not the ace, the second guy in the rotation, and he couldn't do it. I'll give him D+ because his numbers were good at the end of the year, but they were just it was a facade. So D+.
I think this is the pitcher where our grades are going to be so different, at least I assume, and that is David Peterson. David Peterson ended up finishing horribly. No question about it. Finished with an ERA above 4. David Peterson ended up making 30 starts for the New York Mets. 30. In 16 of the 30 starts, he went 6 or more innings. And remember, there was a time before Nolan McLean was called up where nobody besides David Peterson would go 6 innings. In 24 of his 30 starts, he went 5 innings. David Peterson had a very strange season, because if you checked on David Peterson in the middle of August, you would notice he had a sub-3 ERA, which is really good. He was an all-star. But his last few starts were so ridiculously bad. And really, I'll pick the date. I guess I would say August 6th against the Cleveland Guardians is probably when it all began. But if you go from August 6th to the very end of the season, David Peterson's ERA went from 2.98 to 4.02. He ended up pitching to an 8.42 ERA in his final 41 innings. He was horrendous. But I cannot, when we're grading a full season, I cannot ignore April, May, June, and July. I can't do it. And I'll give you a grade analogy. A grades analogy, not a grade analogy, a grades analogy. So here's a kid who comes to school in September and he gets an A in September, an A and gets straight A's. And then come the middle of May, when the final exams are about to come, he gets a couple of F's. And then he fails the finals. He was an A student for 90% of the year. Are you really giving him? Are you really saying he's a D student? Or would you say, boy, something must have happened? I mean, Jesus Christ. Did his parents get divorced? Like, is there a drug problem? Like, what the hell is going on? That the kid got straight A's and then final month, it's like a crumbling. I can't give David Peterson a terrible grade. I'm just telling you, I can't do it. Because 75% of the season, it was spent as him being their most reliable starting pitcher. I can't do it. And I think instead of his parents divorcing or there being some kind of a cocktail issue, he ran into basically an amount of innings that did a number on him. That's the assumption I'm going to make. And so, Hoff, I'm giving him a B. In fact, I was thinking of giving him a B+. I'm going to give him a B because I can't ignore the final few starts. But in April, May, June, July, and August, for 5 of 6 months, he was their most consistent starting pitcher. He went 6 innings every game. He had a sub-3 ERA. And then it crumbled. I'm giving David Peterson a B.
I respect it. Unfortunately, he was so bad where he was almost at that same level of should you really start him? Like that was what we were contemplating. We're like, hey, should he be in the bullpen? Should he be married to somebody? I don't know. So yes, he started out amazing. His grades were great, but he was so bad. He was putting up zeros. He was putting up zeros, dude. And those zeros have an impact. I'll give him a C. He was great to start the season. I think some of that was a little bit, I don't want to say facade. He was good. He was definitely good the first half of the season. He was an all-star. Second half, he was not. And combine that together, it's a C.
Our final pitcher is a guy who came into the season as a major question mark as he was converting from reliever to starter, but he ended up leading the team in innings. Ended up leading the team in starts, stunningly enough. The guy, of course, we're talking about is Clay Holmes, converted reliever. Clay Holmes ended up, to be fair, he ended up finishing 3 innings short of David Peterson. So he was second in innings on the team, but he did lead the team in starts. He ended up making 31 starts with 2 bullpen appearances, 165 and 2/3 innings. He pitched to a 3.53 ERA, a half a run better than David Peterson because of the incredible fall off that David had. 12 and 8. Led the team in wins, if you care about that stat. Second in innings pitched. I can't say it's best ERA because Kodai Senga, believe it or not, had an ERA a half a run better. But Clay Holmes, I think, you talk about final exams. He is going to get, in my eyes, a lot of credit for what he did on that final Saturday of the season. John Maine, Johan Santana, Clay Holmes. The Mets season is on the line. They're desperate for any semblance of starting pitching. And Clay Holmes waited. I guess he waited until his last start of the year to do it. But he delivered his best start of the year in this game against the Miami Marlins. He really did. I was looking at the rest of his starts to see, was that the best start of his season? And it was. It's honestly not even close. Like, he had 9 starts of 6 innings or more. 9. David Peterson, by the way, had 16, just if we're doing comparisons. He had 9 starts where he went 6 innings or more. He gave up runs in all of them. The only game he did not give up a run in was the start against the Miami Marlins. And those other starts, he gave up 3 hits, 4 hits, 8 hits, 3 hits, 7 hits, 4 hits, 9 hits. In the start against the Marlins, he gave up 1 hit. He was unbelievable in that start against Miami. So I do think he gets extra points for the way he closed the season. But overall, I mean, going deep into games was the biggest issue. You know, the fact that he only went 6 innings in 9 of those starts as compared to the 16 that David Peterson had. The issues that he ran into in August when the team really needed him, or really September. If you look at some of the starts that he made in August and September, there was no length. He didn't go long in those games. So they needed him, and he was falling off, and maybe it was the same thing that David Peterson faced, which was running into the amount of innings he threw. But overall, he had a good year. And overall, he did something that only David Peterson was able to do, which is take the baseball every 6 days. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't ideal, but he did it. And I think he far exceeded reasonable expectations for what kind of year Clay Holmes would have. And so for that, I'm also going to give him a B. Because what did we expect from Clay Holmes? What did you expect from Clay Holmes? I probably could give him a little bit higher of a grade, but it's tough to give any starting pitcher too high of a grade considering the year they had. But I'm going to give Clay Holmes a solid B for his performance this year.
Yeah, I will give him a B because the last part kind of rings with me is what did we really expect from Clay Holmes? I expected him to be pitching out of the bullpen. That's what I expected. I expected him to be, he's going to hit a mark for innings pitched, and he was not going to be able to continue. But you know what? I don't know if it was the Mets saying we needed this, like we needed to make sure that this experiment worked. I mean, that's why he made 31 starts. I mean, you think about it was. I know.
They needed him, bro.
I know they did. This is the most impressive thing about Clay Holmes, though, is that yes, he pitched every game, and he was able to survive. Like you got to think about this. They skipped him 1 start. It wasn't because he was hurt. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because they just skipped him. Like that, they chose to skip him. They made sure that he was there for every other game. That's the one thing I'll give. Clay Holmes was impressive for that, and because of the fact that we didn't have expectations, we didn't know what we were going to get. You got to give him a high grade. It's that same thing. It's like I didn't expect him to be an ace. I didn't know what to expect, so I gave him a B. I do think that Clay Holmes deserves it. And just to be fair, he was technically the lowest ERA for a starting pitcher on the Mets because Kodai Senga didn't qualify.
Well, qualifications for leading the league in ERA, you have to – it goes by games played. Like each inning is a games played. So at the end of a 162-game season, the only way you could qualify for an ERA lead is to literally throw 162 innings, which a lot of guys don't even qualify for because of the amount of innings they throw. The Mets literally only had 2 guys qualify for that, and that is Clay Holmes and David Peterson. They were the 2 guys. Give them credit for this. They both got Bs. I get it. They took the ball every 5-6 days. I can't even say every 5 days. Every 6 days. They did. And there's a value to that. You know, we took a lot of marks off players because they weren't available. Availability is a big deal. And David Peterson and Clay Holmes were available every time the Mets needed them to make a start. It didn't end well for David. We all know that. But there is a value to being out there every 5 days. Next up, the relief pitchers. Can't wait to do it. Grade week continues on the Rico Brogna, and of course, it'll all be capped off when we hand that grade out to David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza. If you missed us grading position players, check it out at episode 565, wherever you download your Rico Brognas. And of course, thoughts, disagreements, I'm sure there's plenty. You can email us, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com. Thank you very much for hanging out with us on another Grading the Mets edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.